Welcome to the Everyone's a Critic movie review podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Zero. With me, as always, is professional film critic Sean Patrick. We have a very packed show, so I'm going to run through this really quick so we can keep it to a minimum, keep the length short. So we're at ihatecritics.net, everyone's a critic podcast.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the handle is criticspod, patreon.com /criticspod, the best way to help support the podcast. And there's our TeePublic page at ihatecritics.net. Click on that to get yourself some merch. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa, all your podcatchers, YouTube. Please rate and review the show and review the show. We'll read your reviews on the air. We haven't had one in a while, so that will help us get noticed. I do notice our numbers have gone up, though, this month, so we've gotten a bunch of new listeners. So if you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. And feel free to reach out to us on those social media platforms. We'd love to hear your take on the show and what movies you want us to talk about. And if there's an old movie that we have talked about, but the episode's not available anymore, we can always go find that episode and re-release it. So, yeah, just reach out to us, and thank you for listening. Let's jump right into it, because we have a shit ton of movies to get to. We'll just start with the Netflix film, The Devil All the Time.
All right. The Devil All the Time is a sprawling epic of a story with a huge cast of recognizable faces. But it starts, I guess, with Bill Skarsgard as a World War II veteran who comes home and meets this girl and falls in love and has a baby. And that baby is going to go on to be Tom Holland, who will be the kind of main star. This is a very sprawling, epic sort of movie about crime, but also about the South and about religion and just lots of big themes. And I thought this was an exceptional bringing together of big time themes about religion and duty and family. And really just, I was fascinated by this movie from beginning to end. The choices that everybody makes in terms of how to portray these characters are very interesting. Like, I know there's a lot of people who are having fun with Robert Pattinson's accent in this movie. They think it's either inconsistent or over the top. I think it's all part of the affectation of that character, frankly. I think he's a fake character. He's a fake preacher who sets about seducing and destroying young women for his own, sick pleasure, which is kind of par for the course of this movie. Everybody in this movie is pretty much a terrible human being out to destroy others, aside from maybe Tom Holland. But I found that whole thing that Pattinson's doing in the movie to be very interesting, and I thought that was the point of the character, was he's kind of a fake and he's kind of over the top and just a bastard. So I didn't mind so much that he had this rather large affectation. I thought that was just part of the whole character, but I can see where people would be seeing it another way as just him being an actor and wanting to play a weird accent. I was really struck by Bill Skarsgård early on. He played, he's the first character we meet. He's goes through this horrific trauma of war and comes home, and you keep thinking you're going to know where this character is going. And I found that they found a really soft space between him being the kind of character that we see in movies like this, who's like the abusive, overbearing father with the trauma of war causes him to be a monster, but he's not a monster. He's just this guy who really falls deeply in love with his wife. And as that story unfolds, he finds that life is a little bit unbearable for him as long as she's not there. And I thought that was kind of poignant and very moving. And the way his story plays out, I thought was fascinating. And then you have all these other characters that are kind of work and kind of don't. Jason Clarke is grown to me to be this when I see him, I groan these days after what he's done the past few years. And he wasn't groan worthy this time, but certainly he's one of the weaker elements of this. He and Riley Keough play characters who are kind of I guess they're serial killers, or he's a serial killer and she's just kind of along for the ride. I didn't quite understand the point of them. I guess they're necessary for the ending of the movie, but they're kind of superfluous overall, for me anyway. I mean, there could be a greater meaning to, there's what they symbolize for the movie, but I didn't really dig into them, and I didn't really want to dig into them. But Tom Holland's really great. This is a very grown-up performance on his part. He's very smartly played, very close to his chest. Really plays this character in a very believable Southern sort of way, where it's just he doesn't share his emotions very much until he has to, and when he does, it's very explosive. And that scene with him and Pattinson in the church is a classic. That is a really great scene. I loved it. I was really impressed by that. I gotta ask why they cast Mia Wasikowska in this movie, especially in a role that she's in. She's barely there.
Right.
She exists hardly at all, and she's very much overcast for the performance for the role that they give her. And not that everybody knows who Mia Wasikowska is. I just happen to think she's a really incredible actress, and seeing her in this very tiny role was kind of puzzling for me. I kept waiting for her to matter, and then she really doesn't in the end. But overall, I thought this movie was really engaging, and I was really won over by it. I was definitely under the spell of this film. Even I didn't feel like it was over long. I was just kind of fascinated by every one of these. Every one of the twists and turns of it. I couldn't wait for it to get to where it was going.
Yeah, I for the most part, I agree with it. I guess my main criticism of it is, ask me about it this a month from now, and I probably won't remember it. But it is, because it's not. It's really, really good. Maybe even great, but it's not like a movie that's going to stick with me forever because of the fact that it's sprawling, like you said. It's not over long, but it just kind of it goes on, because you basically go through different lifetimes in it. Or, I mean, that's hard to say, but you change characters throughout. You change main characters. I do think this is obviously Spider-Man is a making performance, but because this is not Spider-Man and he is so good in it, I think this really is a star-making performance for Tom Holland. I mean, he really does stand out, and he's really great in it. I agree with you about Robert Pattinson. And to the point where I'd almost be annoyed at people who do say what they say about the accent, because they miss the point.
Yeah.
And so I don't. And Jason Clarke, I mean, say what you will, he's a creepy looking guy. He's a creep. I mean, he to the point where I almost feel like he's a creep in real life, which isn't necessarily what you want to do. But I mean, if you need a creep, bring him in. And it almost is like like you said, they're there to glue the movie together. Although I don't know what the purpose is either, other than to get you to the end and show how everybody's connected, I guess. It's a fine scene, I guess, at the end. A little bit of tension, but I don't know how you end it, but you could have cut them out, and the movie could have cut down on time without them in it. Definitely.
Yeah, and also, the whole Sebastian Stan thing. I mean, the failure to make him matter is another issue with this movie. Again, I think the direction is so strong that I didn't really mind so much that there were a lot of these seemingly superfluous elements, but I felt like especially Sebastian Stan should have mattered more if he was going to be the one who comes down to at the end. He's going to be the final showdown. They should have made him matter more early on then.
No kidding. I was kind of like, oh yeah, he's in this. I mean, really, you almost could have ended it with the scene with him and Pattinson. I mean, it would have been hard. I mean, maybe it would have been a disappointment at that, but that was a hell of a scene, and it's a hell of a showdown. And then it still goes on for another 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it was. And I mean, again, I have no complaints. This is a really good movie. It was an easy watch. To me, a movie this epic, I want to be talking about it forever, and maybe because it's so different than a lot of movies that, like, say what you will about Braveheart, we still talk about it years later. Like, love it or hate it, at least you're talking about it. I don't feel like we'll be talking about this next year. That's
definitely not.
And that's what I want out of a movie, that with this kind of a cast, and that's really this good. There's just something missing overall beyond that. But otherwise, I mean, it's perfect for what it was doing, more or less.
Yeah. The performance of Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Robert Pattinson, and I think it was Haley Bennett who plays Charlotte. I thought those were all just immaculate performances. I mean, just so engaging that I put aside the many screaming things in the back of my head. Like, Sebastian Stan was nagging at me throughout, after it was over,
right,
when it was him at the end. That became like this big nagging thing, and we like, why didn't he matter more? And then Riley Keough and Jason Clarke's characters are just again, there was so much contrivance to get them to be where they are, where Tom Holland is at that moment. That is such a huge leap of logic to get him into that moment at that time, just after his confrontation with Pattinson, that did create a tipping point for me for this. But Holland and Pattinson were so great in the scene before that I just was kind of in the wash of that. I didn't care so much about that. Yeah. So there's a lot wrong with this movie, and that's definitely why it won't be remembered.
Yeah, I suppose I shouldn't say it's perfect then. You're right. There's a lot that ties it together. But yeah, I mean, I guess the stuff that's wrong does make for some intense scenes, but I will say when Bill Skarsgard's character his story came to an end, my son happened to walk in the room looking at me, asking a question. I missed the whole thing, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, did he just kill himself? I mean, spoiler alert, but it's pretty early on. So
yeah.
That's my wife, and then rewind it a little bit. So it's just like, because it really does come out of nowhere.
It really does. It's really, wow. It was a bold choice. I was all there for it.
And it was fun to be like the clown from It, Spider-Man and Batman all in the same movie. But I mean, it's worth checking out.
Don't forget the Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's who he is. That's how meaningful his character was. I forgot it was the Winter Soldier. But yeah, I mean, it's there on Netflix. If you got nothing else to do in quarantine, it's definitely worth checking out. Let's move on. Let's go to H is for Happiness.
H is for Happiness. This is my new favorite movie of 2020. I'm not joking. John Sheedy is the director of this film, and this is based off a kid's book. It's an Australian family film about a 12-year-old girl by the name of Candace, who is this wonderfully engaging character, just one of the happiest characters I've ever seen on screen. She's got this assignment where she's been assigned, she's going to be assigned a letter of the alphabet to describe her life. And they're going to use the alphabet as a way of, kind of getting to know each other. All these students that's the whole point of it, is that they're going to, go through the alphabet and come up with a word that matches the letter to talk about your life. And each will be assigned a letter at the end to do a presentation. But that's not really the point. That's just kind of the structure of it uses that. And that's where we get to the title of H is for Happiness, which ends up being twisted at the end, which I just love. I love this movie so much. It's just the happiest thing. Like, it reminded me a lot of the feeling that I had still watching Legally Blonde, where there's just boundless joy in this movie. And I had so much fun. This character, Candace, is just such a sweetheart. And I thought for sure I was going to tire of her quirks, and I never did. They found just the right amount of her quirks, where she's got this new friend, Douglas Benson, who he tells her he has a secret, and she's like, well, I can't keep secrets. And he's like, he just has to tell her anyway. He tells her that he's from another dimension. And so she starts referring to him as Douglas Benson from another dimension. And she does that to him. Like, she tells us that in voiceover, but she's also saying that to him. And she has to say everybody's complete name. She refers to her uncle as Rich Uncle Brian. And I thought for sure I was going to tire of this, and I never did, because she's just so adorable and so sweet and so guileless. And her life is not perfect. This movie is very smart about creating a realistic family life that she's not unaware of, but it's like it so captures perfectly the view of a 12-year-old child who wouldn't see the problems as dramatically as older people do, as parents do. Parents have obviously, her mother, she's lost a baby sister who passed away in the crib, and her mother is not recovered from this. Even after 4 years, she's still very depressed and barely leaves her room. Her father has had a falling out with his brother, Rich Uncle Brian, and her father's played by Richard Roxburgh. And he's sort of retreated into himself. He's still, more engaged than his wife is, because he kind of has to be. Otherwise, nobody would be taking care of this little girl. And so he's there, but he's not. He's still kind of lost in his own grief, but also, this frustration at where his life is. And you get that sense, but you're also, it's all being shot through the prism of this very happy, very sweet little girl who thinks, I can fix this. I can fix these people, and sets about trying to do so in the most 12-year-old ways imaginable. And I just adore this movie.
Yeah, I like this quite a bit. And here's, I mean, you probably already did a better job explaining it than I could, but here's kind of what I've been in my head. It's, you take kind of a shitty movie like something like Matilda or one of those kid movies, and I
was thinking Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid. You got that tone. That's right. Kind of what you're watching, but behind it, it's Little Miss Sunshine or Juno mixed with like Wonder, so you got real life behind this kid movie. And that's what, when I sit here and I watch a movie like Peanuts, and everybody liked Peanuts, and I was like, yeah, but he's going to grow up and whatever. This had that there for me, which makes it that much better. It included real life with that, 12-year-old perspective, like you said, mixed with just an ending that is so funny that you're laughing with tears coming out of your eyes at the same time. I don't know. It's just such a well-made, smart movie.
That ending is absolute genius. That is such a great ending. You cannot predict what is about to happen in this ending, and it's just glorious.
I mean, it's almost probably better, really. It's more unpredictable than the ending of Little Miss Sunshine, but it's along those lines of unpredictability. It's just a really tight, well-made, smart movie. You sit and talk about movies like Enemy and whatever, and how perfect they are and how they got to intertwine, and one little thing goes wrong and it falls apart. This is the same thing, just in a kid's movie, and that's what's really impressive about it, is how well they weave everything together and make it work and make it have such a such a punch to it. So I could see this one. This is something I'll remember. I remember when Wonder came out a few years ago. I think I still had that on my top 10 of the year because of how much it surprised me. Obviously, it's not my typical type of movie, but it definitely caught me off guard, and it was so well made that you can't not love this movie.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie of the year. It's even better than She Dies Tomorrow. Honestly, I know those are two weird comparisons. You can't compare them in terms of what they are, but if I'm doing a top 10 list right now, this one surpassed that, and I love that movie. So this is like two movies this year that are just so much better than every other movie I've seen. Obviously, I know you have The Hunt, but these two for me are just so superior to everything else out there.
Yeah, and this will definitely be on the top 10. Also, it's not fair with, one, I don't know what's going to come out and how it's all going to come out at the end of the year.
Right.
This is one I'll definitely remember, unlike the last one we just talked about.
It's interesting. I don't know if I would have gotten to see a movie like this if it weren't for the quarantine and all this, because I don't know if I would have sought this out. Not that I sought this out, but I wouldn't have I would have looked at this email in my inbox with the screener and thought to myself, I don't know, I've got to get ready for this weekend with all this, blockbuster stuff coming out. I'll think about getting to it. And now, of course, with nothing to go to the theater for, this happened to be something that I had time for. And I'm so glad I did. I'm like, thank you, COVID, I guess.
Yeah. A movie like Wonder that did well, you still had Jennifer Garner and Owen Wilson to kind of get it to the theater. I don't know. Like you said, you're right. I probably never would have seen this movie before. I'm glad we did. This is, go seek this one out. It's, of all the new movies this week, this is the one to go look for.
Australia is having a very good year because this and Dirt Music, which came out last month, are two just excellent movies, both Australian based.
All right, let's move on to The Nest.
Yes, The Nest. Jude Law and Carrie Coon star in this movie that I honestly thought was going to be like a spy movie. I guess I didn't know. I didn't read the description. I thought just the title, and I thought Jude Law was playing a spy for some reason. So I started watching the movie like, what is something like that going to happen? And it doesn't happen because this is not that movie, and I like this so much more. This is a really good film. And I'm coming off like I love everything these days, but This is just really good. The Nest is about Jude Law's character who decides that he's tired of living in New York and wants to move back to London, where he was born. And he's got this job offer that he says that is going to make his family a whole lot of money. His wife is played by Carrie Coon, Allison, and she's a little not necessarily interested in this idea, but she's going to go along with it because she's a very supportive wife. And he makes all these promises, like. She's a horse trainer, and he's going to buy her a horse. He's going to make her own horse school that she can have a horse and train horses and train people to ride horses. All these big promises that he makes. But this turns out to be something that he does all the time, is make a lot of big promises and talk a lot of big talk. And it turns out she's actually well aware of that. She's been through this for a while. And it's fun to watch this be revealed that she's always known who he is, and yet she's cares about him enough that she's tolerated it until now, where he's pushed it to such a degree, this whole lie about who he is and what his life is, that she's finally, the cracks are starting to show, and she's really kind of this close to just giving up completely on this guy. This is interesting. Jude Law's done this in the past too, where he plays these very handsome characters that handsome, confident characters that you deconstruct their ego and you start taking apart the pieces of who they are behind being just so incredibly handsome. And he's very good at that. But this is the one really where it's almost precise to a surgical degree of him being just dissected by Carrie Coon. And I could watch her just take his balls and just crush them in her hands over and over again. It's just so many good scenes of her just taking his ego and just crushing it. And he deserves it. He earns it every time. He earns that treatment. And it's beautiful. She is so amazing. And of course, she played the sister in Gone Girl. And she's just been amazing in so many different things. But this is one where she gets to be really right up front. And it's exciting to watch. There's a dinner scene in this movie where Jude Law is just pouring on the bullshit, just layering bullshit on top of bullshit. And she just and so somebody turns to her and asks her, "So what have you been doing while you've been in London?" She goes, "I've been shoveling shit so we can make some money." And she actually has been but the contempt that she has in that line is so beautiful. There's so much to love about this.
I think this might actually be in theaters right now. I tried to stream it and it wasn't available, and I went to IMDb this morning to see when it would be. And it was showing me showtimes across the country.
Yeah, I saw that too.
So, I mean, in some ways that's cool. Unfortunately, no one's going to the movies right now. So, I mean, fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, you hate to see people not make money. But I mean, it's cool. I mean, this trailer looks amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing it when I get a chance. So I'm glad it's good.
Yeah, it's kind of got a modern Cassavetes feel, which I really dig. And Carrie Coon could not be more perfect for that type of thing.
All right, let's move on to 10 Minutes to Midnight.
All right, 10 Minutes to Midnight is a radio set horror movie. This actually stars the lady who was one of the radio people in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. By the name of Carolyn Williams. She stars here as Amy Marlowe, who is a radio DJ in Texas. It's her last night. She's being essentially forced into retirement. It's unclear if she knows she's being forced into retirement, because this movie's kind of sloppy in that way, where it doesn't really... the story beats are introduced and then are dismissed in ways that don't make a lot of sense. But basically, she's on her last night. She's on her way into the building. There's a massive storm coming through. This massive hurricane is happening, and she gets bit on the neck by a bat in the parking lot. And rather than give up her final show, she just puts on a bandage and decides she's going to go ahead and do the show anyway. And she finds out that she's going to be joined in the studio by the woman who's replacing her, Sienna, played by Nicole Kang. And she's dealing with this kind of creepy boss who's all over the place and just being a total creep. I think I'm trying to figure out which actor it is who played him. Martin Sola, I think, is the guy. And from there, she begins to kind of lose touch with reality every now and again. Just things just kind of, she's sweating and she's kind of, losing. She's kind of getting angry. And there's this character who Nicholas Tucci plays that seemingly for some reason knows everything about rabies, and he keeps going on about the various different symptoms of rabies, and she seems to be exhibiting all of them. Then this turns into this bizarre horror movie where she bites another person, and that person maybe becomes a vampire, and then maybe she's a vampire, and then all the characters change. All the characters except Amy change characters, so now they're playing other characters than who they were earlier in the movie. But they're all the same characters, but they're all played by the same different actors. It's weird. Like the producer guy becomes the security guard, and the girl Sienna becomes the boss, and the boss becomes Amy's best friend. It's weird. It's a weird thing, and I'm not sure where that was going. Overall, this movie is just so sloppy that I really couldn't enjoy it very much. And really, that type of sloppiness it seems to have a point. It's not poorly directed in terms of being a kind of a B-movie horror, but overall it's just too sloppy for me to really get excited about it.
Probably another movie you wouldn't have seen if COVID wasn't going on right now.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I couldn't find this one either, but I didn't really want to watch this one. So I was kind of okay. I mean, then when you go into the actors played, or the characters become different people, or that, how do you pull it off without being sloppy? That would be a really tough move to make. I suppose if you did, that'd be pretty impressive. But
I mean, it's actually maybe the element that kind of works best though is that because it is such a weird choice. And one of the actress Sierra, Nicole Kang, she switches characters to become the creepy boss, and she's actually kind of having a lot of fun, and it does create this sort of surreal thing. But that's not what the movie was. It wasn't surreal. It was like a vampire horror zombie movie to a point. And for it to make this surrealistic turn like that, it's just the wrong movie to have that in it, even as that may be the best executed part of the film.
Cool. All right, the next movie we're not really going to review. We're just going to say whether we liked it or not, and then we're going to... What do you think about this? Interweaving this in between Flickchart, just kind of talking about it while we rate movies, just so we can kind of... It's a hard movie to talk about, because if we recommend it and why we recommend it, it might kind of spoil your experience. So does that sound good at the end of the show? We do Flickchart and talk about this movie. It's called Alive. And I like it. It's kind of a small budget, not quite torture porn, but kind of from that ilk. I don't know, type of movie, but not quite hostile. But I don't know. What are your quick?
I am honestly just entirely uncertain how I feel about this movie. I think I like it. It's weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. There's so much to say about it, but you can't really say anything about it without, I mean, it's just a massive, spoiler, to even talk about it. The plot really, I mean, you can talk about it a little bit. There are two characters who wake up in the middle of nowhere. They've been perhaps in an accident, or they were close to death, and they were rescued by this guy played by Angus McFadden, and really almost playing like the character he was playing in Saw, almost.
Right. And you're almost not certain if they were rescued or if he's there, he captured them. I mean, there's so much going on. I don't know. To me, it's an experience. So we'll talk more about it later on at the end of the show, because there may be spoilers there. So if you like to turn it off during Flickchart, or if you don't want to hear the spoilers, you can turn it off when we're done. At the end. So we'll move the rest of that review to the end of the show. And we'll briefly go over two more movies. Blackbird.
Blackbird, directed by Roger Mitchell, and with an all-star cast of, once again, Mia Wasikowska, but also Kate Winslet, Susan Sarandon, Sam Neill, Rainn Wilson. The family is gathering at their parents' beach house for a weekend in which the matriarch, the mother, Susan Sarandon is going to die. She's got a terminal illness, and she doesn't want to wait for that illness to run its course. She's decided that she's going to end her life this weekend, and she's gathered her entire family to be there to spend time with her before she ends her life. And naturally, this is leads to a lot of various different dramas. You've got two sisters who don't get along very well, and Kate Winslet and Mia Wasikowska. One of them thinks that maybe she's going to do something to prevent her mother from killing herself because she's not, she doesn't want to see this happen. And Kate Winslet is married to Rainn Wilson, which is weird, but kind of works, I guess. not the first two people you would think to be together. Sam Neill's, typically great. This is a very good cast. I was kind of worried I was going to write it off as one of these movies, where, good-looking rich white people suffer a little bit. But Susan Sarandon actually grounds this movie pretty well in a very kind of real place where she's just kind of slapping everybody back to reality pretty regularly, and I did enjoy that. So I like this movie. I don't love it. It's not one I'm going to remember very long, but it's good enough. I found the release of this one weird. This was put out by Fathom Events, the company that does these big stunt movies. Like they did Mandy, I think, and they did just these roadshow films. Like, why this? Right. Why would they put this out? I have no idea, but they did, and I don't know where anybody's going to be able to see this anytime soon after that, but it's handsome and well acted.
And then the other one is Teenage Badass.
Yes, Teenage Badass is about a rock and roll band, about a drummer specifically who lands the opportunity to join this band, and one of the bands he really likes in his small town in Arizona. They are just kind of very good band that's about to maybe break through. They're led by this guy who's really kind of this. He's definitely a drug addicted weirdo, but he also happens to be kind of extraordinarily talented. Like, you can sense that he's very good at this, and the music that they put together for him to make him seem like a genius does kind of work to make you believe that this guy would definitely attract a lot of people and a lot of attention. The young drummer's 19 years old, and he just kind of gets drawn into this world of drugs and music, and it's a loose, fun, kind of fun movie. Nothing memorable, nothing really terrific, like must see or anything, but it's passable, enjoyable, romantic, kind of funny, and yeah, I mean, if you like rock and roll movies about rock bands, this is not a bad one to watch.
You just have to make sure it's, when you say rock, you're talking about like the 2006 era of rock.
It's actually set during that time, actually, yes.
Right. Yeah, so I just giving everybody a heads up. That's why I didn't watch it. I was listening to, the music was, what I liked about the trailer was the music they used in it. I'm assuming it's the music they used in the movie. It wasn't generic and cheap like a lot of these, low-end movies would do, but it's, it's its own era, and it's not my era, so I don't care. All right, let's move on to our classic.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event for the linear, legitimate, and universally recognized, undisputed classic.
Raging Bull.
Wait, which movie is this? I'm kidding. Raging Bull, 1980, the runner-up to Ordinary People somehow as Best Picture that year. Robert De Niro stars as Jake LaMotta, the boxing legend, I guess you would call him. And this is a portrait of his life based off of his own book, and directed by Martin Scorsese, of course, and directed just so extraordinarily well that you can't take your eyes off the screen while it's playing. This is a movie that's just so incredibly well structured. An observation of a person who is in all really senses a terrible human being, but one you just not feel sorry for, or even sympathize with, but you're just fascinated by the various ways in which he lives his life. He's so on the surface. Everything is just of a moment for him. it's almost as if he experiences life every second of it. Like there's no thoughtfulness to this character. Everything is immediate and earnest and horrifying at times, because I don't know if he doesn't seem to have an awareness of it, of a full-on inner life, other than the various insecurities that are there that he's not even aware of, but that express themselves in the way he acts towards other people. He expresses all of his inner turmoil externally, because I don't think he has the ability to fully process anything that isn't directly in front of him in that moment. And that is such a fascinating look at a character. Not to say that Jake LaMotta doesn't have an entirely an inner life. Everybody does, but his is so strange and unique, because it seems like he doesn't last very long. He's got the attention span of like a I don't know what you would describe it, but he's so of the moment, and and it makes him so pathetic and yet fascinating. He's a pathetic character. I mean, he's violent and mean, and yet there's this desire in him to be this soft and cuddly person. He wants everybody to like him, and yet he's awful to the people who actually do. And that is a fascinating thing. But then you've got the whole boxing scenes and these amazingly constructed scenes of violence and horror that are just so perfect. The way that they're captured, just so beautifully captured in this black and white photography, and just endlessly fascinating. I love this movie so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is a work of art. It's totally an art project. De Niro's never been better. Scorsese I think he's had better movies, but I don't think he's had better directorial efforts, if that makes any sense. Like, as a story, I'm always story first, and this is more of an examination of a guy. So, I'll take the movie we're going to get to over this one, but this is still it's so artistically fulfilling, and it's just, the insecurities, like you said, you mentioned, and I'd never even thought about the Somewhere Over the Rainbow and the score. You'd kind of texted me that, and I hadn't watched it yet, and I could not hear it after that. And I Googled it to see if that you were onto something, or if that had been, like, you just came up with that on your own, or if other people had seen it, and other people had. And there was a lot of comparisons to The Wizard of Oz about how, that's not why it's in black and white, but it worked out that it kind of works, where, he never did get out of Kansas. He never got to Oz. And when it is in color, it's all kind of in memory. So he's so in the moment that he's never enjoying anything. He's, the insecurities are so strong that when they do show color, it's more a memory, and he can look back at something as, pleasant or good, but it's never good at the time. He's so insecure about everything. And then you throw in De Niro's performance, at the end when he's, quoting Brando. De Niro himself, or he's quoting Brando, quoting somebody else. De Niro's a good enough actor where he could have just done a Brando impersonation, but he doesn't. It's almost better, because as if Jake LaMotta was trying to do it, he almost does it bad, which makes it that much better. I don't know. It's just such a fantastic acting performance that, choices you don't even think to make until you're watching him do it, and you're just like, this is unbelievable. Then Kathy Moriarty at 19 or whatever the hell she was, she looks so much older. The way she acts so much older. Everything she did, she's really great in this movie. And then obviously the introduction to Joe Pesci. I don't know. This is such a great movie, but it's one of those where, I hate putting movies on the list, because there's movies like this, like The Big Lebowski. You just kind of put them off to the side as nothing's really like this. It's kind of its own lane. It's such a, I don't know where I rank it. My favorite movie is Rocky. What's the best boxing movie of all time? Well, they're not even comparable. This is beyond a boxing movie. This is an art project. Rocky's a story about it's different. So I can't even compare the two. It is such its own thing that makes me love it that much more.
It's funny, as if this movie had been made today and in the way that they made it, it would have drove you nuts, because De Niro did this thing where they took 6 months off from making this movie so he could go and get fat specifically for the end of the movie, for the start and the end of the movie. That kind of method bullshit that drives you nuts. And did you know that?
Oh yeah, I knew that.
That's just usually the kind of thing that drives you nuts when actors get so deep into that bullshit.
I don't mind. What drives me nuts when they take it home and like you got to call him. Like if he made everybody call him Jake LaMotta, that would drive me nuts. I don't mind. I mean, it's like losing weight is impressive. I mean, at the same time, you've heard the horror stories, Matt Damon and Christian Bale, the stuff they've gone through where they've got unhealthy. But it's to me, I don't mind the, stuff like that, or like what's his name from Hangover took his tooth out and all that stuff. I think that's cool. And I remember Sean Penn was on Saturday Night Live and he was doing a De Niro impression where he's like, I took 2 vertebrae out, made myself a little shorter for this role. But I don't know. I think something like that's kind of neat. It's also cool when like something like Boyhood, where they actually wait 20 years or whatever to film the whole thing. There's something neat about that. I mean, I don't mind being a hypocrite. It's just really when you go home. If he was making everybody call him Jake and all that, and he was really beating his wife and stuff, that would be a little much for me.
Is it Jake or Jack? Because that drove me nuts throughout the movie. Why do they keep referring to him as Jack?
I don't know. I've heard the nickname for John is Jack. I've never heard Jake is Jack, but I don't.
That drove me nuts for some reason. Not that it hurts the movie in any way. It's just one of those weird things that I just didn't understand why that kept happening.
Well, and all the backstory behind this movie, I mean, it's obviously De Niro was reading the book, and it became a passion project for him, and Scorsese didn't want to do it. And then in some ways, I think it was more therapeutic for Scorsese. He had drug problems at the time, and he was maybe relating to the character a little too much. And so it's just kind of this perfect storm of everything aligning, stars aligning, and it's a masterpiece, and it's something everybody should see. Maybe not everybody, but.
What do you think of the boxing scenes in terms of the raw violence of those boxing scenes?
I think they're very effective, and then you throw in the way Scorsese shot it, which made it even more violent than they probably were. I loved it. It's not, obviously the other Rockies hadn't really come out yet, so you can't really compare those. I don't know. It was so cinematic. It was so. I don't even know how to explain. I really liked it. I thought the violence was really effective, and I don't know.
I saw this movie for the first time when I was 8 years old, and there's the scene where I can't remember who he's fighting, maybe the French guy. He punches him in the face, and blood comes out, spurting out of the top of the guy's nose, not his nasal, but like just near the top of his nose is cracked open, and blood spurts out. And I didn't sleep that night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. That's the thing is, you watch. I mean, I don't watch MMA or anything like that, but some things that you just never know. What you're. I don't know. You never get that. Like, even if you watch. I remember watching Tyson fights, or whatever, for the 30 seconds they were on as a kid. And it was, you're kind of from a distance, like kind of similar to a Rocky movie where you're kind of just watching the ring. Here, it was so close. It was almost like you got to see something you don't see in real life, even though it may or may not be happening. I'm assuming it happens on occasion. But, even Tyson biting Holyfield's ear off, if Scorsese had shot that, it would have seemed that much crazier than it was. It was just the way the camera was at, the way it was just so much more real life, where you kind of get to hide behind the distance, normally when you watch a fight. And that made it that much more effective for me. I thought it was really, really neat. And
it's like you're saying, oh, hey, you like boxing? Let's see how much you like boxing.
Yeah. This is what they really go through.
Put you right in here and see.
Yeah. I loved that. I thought it was really effective. And I don't know. It's
such an amazing work of art, really, and just LaMotta is so pathetic. His first, I was listening to a podcast about this, and they were talking about LaMotta, and they said on set he watched the way that De Niro played him, and he thought, "Oh, gee, I might not be that bad a guy." Then he watched the actual movie after it was cut together, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not a very good person, am I?"
Yeah, I mean, just the insecurities. I mean, he was literally winning and losing boxing matches based on his insecurities. It's insane. You just get your head in the right spot. You think of what could be different. And that's literally what he's asking at the end of the movie when he's quoting whatever
on the waterfront.
Yeah, I don't know what could have been if he had been more secure. It's just sad. But
instead of trying to win the fight, against Sugar Ray, he's like, "You never got me down." Yeah. Like that was more important to him than winning the fight. It would seem. It was just the ego, that momentary ego of like, "Yeah, I never went down." Like, yeah, you didn't. But look at your fucking face, dude.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. His priorities are never on. I don't know. It is a hell of a movie, and it's weird. Like I was saying, it's not like I have my favorite Scorsese movie, and this is probably better, but it's just in it's in a league of its own. It's hard to compare it to anything else.
This almost feels like the most collaborative of his movies, not necessarily the most personal. Like because I think there's a lot of this is driven by De Niro, and even some of it is driven by Thelma Shoemaker and the way she edits it together, which is so fucking beautiful. There's almost an element, not so much that it's not Scorsese at the helm running it. He is, and he's definitely in charge. But there's almost a feeling like of a less investment, a less of a personal feeling about it, as opposed to something like Goodfellas, which feels more, or even The Departed, or his movies that feel like more his. Like, did you know that Joe Pesci's character wasn't in the book?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wasn't in the book. Schroeder, Robert Schroeder, the screenwriter, basically went to Florida and found out that LaMotta had a brother, and that was his way of getting into this is my way in here to show people this character, because he needed a way in that would differentiate this from being like Taxi Driver, where you're just kind of forced into De Niro's perspective the entire time. I don't know if that would have worked for being in the perspective of Jake the entire time. So having his brother there gives you the in to see him, and creates a different sort of dynamic about how you view Jake, and that he brought that to the movie, that I think it changed the way that that wasn't Scorsese's choice, that was Schroeder's choice to bring that in there, or Schrader.
Yeah, and Joe Pesci was about to give up on acting, and De Niro brought him in, and then Pesci brought in Kathy Moriarty. So. Yeah, and when you go back to not being your typical Scorsese movie where he's not as invested, I think that I really think this is his best directorial effort because of that. Yeah, there's no comfort zone, so he's got to be more creative and more artistic, and that's really where he shined in this. Is it's not his personal story, but he found a way to make it. He found a way to relate to it, and he found a way to just be. I don't know. It's just the artistic point of view coming from not being as comfortable, from being outside of his comfort zone. He's not a sports guy whatsoever, and here he is directing the best boxing scenes ever in the history of movies. That's saying something right there. That's what's. It's so impressive to me.
It's almost as if you really needed an outsider to tell this story, in terms of being an outsider to boxing or an outsider to sports. Loving sports, you need somebody who has the perspective on this that a true boxing fan might not have. The boxing fans, somebody who loves boxing might romanticize boxing too much, and Scorsese does not have the romance of boxing. He doesn't care about boxing. He cares about how boxing tells this story, and how it reflects who Jake is, and the brutality and the that of the moment quality to his life, because you cannot be outside of the moment. You can't be in your head in a boxing match. You have to be in that moment. That's what makes Jake LaMotta, is that he's never not in the moment.
And that's where, if obviously the comparisons to Rocky separate, you need the romance in Rocky for that movie to work, and you need the romance out of it for this movie to work, and that's why they're not really even comparable movies. One's a boxing movie, one's not. One just has boxing in it, go see this movie.
It's interesting. It's interesting, to return to the Kathy Moriarty character for a moment, and the issues that they have. Obviously, there's an abusive quality there, but also there's a topic of sex that comes up repeatedly. He's very suspicious that she's cheating on him, and she may be cheating on him because he's not having sex with her repeatedly. He's going out of his way to not have sex with her, and there's this question, that lingers over him. Like, does he not understand sex? Does he not does it? and I wonder if how much that reflects like his inability to. I mean, he's of the moment, and maybe I'm trying to get to a point here. And there's a point I had that I'm kind of missing, but there's almost a childlike quality to him that he really wants to have sex, but doesn't quite know how.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's one of his insecurities is definitely sexual.
And that comes out in the conversation about his hands. He's got tiny hands, and that's, again, reflective of the desperate insecurity that he has, of being perceived as small or being perceived as not being good enough. And that reflected in that conversation about having tiny hands.
Yeah. I love this movie. Is there anything else on it before we move on to another great one?
No, I think that's it. I wish I could have had my point better there, but
well, I know what you're saying. It doesn't. She never. It's not important if she's cheating or not. He believes she was, and she never. Yeah. You never know as an audience, and she never confirms or denies it, and she shouldn't have to. And it really goes back to his insecurities, which is such a strong part of the movie. And then if there really is a tying to the Wizard of Oz, we've alluded to, that even makes it that much neater. I don't know.
He really is all of those characters in one when you get down to it. The Wizard of Oz characters.
Yeah, without ever being in Oz, which is...
Yeah.
It's such a... I mean, it's a work of art. All right. Goodfellas, 1990. That's what came out this week, along with a bunch of other stuff that we're not going to talk about, but let's talk about Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, of course, once again, we got De Niro, but also we got Pesci, and then Ray Liotta is the star as Henry Hill, who's the subject of this story, who I've talked to, by the way. I've actually spoken to Henry Hill, which is interesting. He left. He leaves at the end. Years afterwards, he left. What is it? Correct. What do they call it?
Witness protection.
Witness protection, and goes on a book tour of all things, which is hilarious. But that was an interesting conversation. But Henry Hill he got into being in the mob at a very young age. He eventually kind of settles into this crew with him and Tommy, played by De Niro, and by Pesci, and what is De Niro's character's name? I can't remember it now.
Jimmy?
Yeah, Jimmy. Yeah, Jimmy. Jimmy and Tommy. And and it's just this very cool, very Scorsese examination of crime and the capturing of this world in a way that is so very, very cool. Not that what they do is cool, but just the way it's presented is very cool. And I was thinking about this in terms of the what we hate about Wolf of Wall Street, where it's just so hands off and so non-judgmental, and how that doesn't work for that, because it's almost presenting it as if it was not a good thing, but they certainly just don't condemn him enough. Right. They don't present enough of the awful to really give you the proper perspective on how awful Jordan Belfort is. Here, there's no question about how awful these guys are, because they're killing people. That sets up a very, a very simple morality. It's a very black and white morality there, that these are awful human beings who are murdering people and stealing things. And I thought that's an interesting way to look at this movie, is through that lens.
But there's something, before you go further, there's something to that, though, where, and they mention it with Ray Liotta's wife, is there's something almost appealing about it. Like, as an audience member, I'm more likely to go down that road than I would be the Jordan Belfort. Like, I never in a million years am I going to rip off a million people, but there's something appealing about that lifestyle. There's something romantic about it. I don't know. You seem cooler. There's just something there. There's a community. There's a lot of things there and then there's bad stuff as well, and he captures that really well with this movie too, which is where I think the difference is yes, they're really bad, but at the same time, there's something there that you like about these guys, where there's nothing I like about Jordan Belfort.
These are the kind of guys, like, if you were in that neighborhood, you'd kind of want to be on their side. Like, you don't necessarily, if you were on their side, if you were part of their crew, like, if you were under their protection, like, you might not mind it so much. There's a sense of community there. There's a sense of family there. There's a sense of protection there that is enticing, that does have an appeal, and I think that's quite a reasonable way to look at it. I know people would like it to be more cut and dried, but it's truly that is an appealing thing if you get down to it. Who wouldn't want to feel protected and have a lot of money and family and friends,
right?
If you take the criminal aspect of it away, like the actual criminal aspect of killing people and stealing from people, there's a great deal of appeal to having a community like that.
Which, and if you really watch this movie all the way through, when that stuff goes out of line, when it's not deserved, which is a weird way of saying, but that's when stuff starts to fall apart for characters. When they go out of line, there is kind of a code and to this community, and if you're going to break that code, you're going to be in trouble. And
yeah,
and I don't know, there's just something about that's kind of cool, even when it's horrible.
If you imagine for a moment, the world that Paul Sorvino's character kind of creates, that's in the background of this for the most part, but he's the big overall guy essentially, and under his wing, like, he's businesses are thriving. They're protected from crime. He keeps drugs out of the neighborhood. Like, as much as he's a criminal who's stealing things and doing things that are outside the law, at the same time, his neighborhood, because of him, kind of thrives in a weird way, and drugs stay out of there until Henry comes along.
Right. So we should defund the police and get more Paul Sorvinos around all these neighborhoods.
I'm not saying
that. No. I'm kidding. That is simply a joke. But you're right. That is what's so neat about it is, and nobody who's saying defund the police is saying that either. I'm literally making a joke. That was all. But that, you're right, though. There's just those neighborhoods were thriving. Everything was great. And it took, someone, I don't know. You're right. When Henry brought it in.
A guy who was strong-arming people and hurting people, but he was also hurting people who were hurting other people. So there's kind of that there's almost a Robin Hood mentality to that's easy to appreciate. And then the reason it all comes crashing down is because people start to get greedy and they start to do more things that are outside the law, but even further outside the law and outside of the code that was created by guys like Sorvino's character. And once you start stepping outside of that, then things begin to crash down, and you start to break the rules, and that's where everything fails.
Yeah, and yeah, this movie is so iconic, it's not even funny. Joe Pesci's character alone has defined him for years. Love it or hate it, the whole clown bit. Go ahead. I
have a question about that though. There's something that's been nagging at me about the cultural view of this movie that just kind of, I don't know if it puzzles me about people who like this movie, but people who keep quoting, "Go get your shine box," like that's really a cool line. It's coming from a guy that's just a total asshole who aimed at one of the characters that we're not supposed to like, but at least is the is a main character. Like the perspective is off. Like why people think that line is cool to me. I just don't understand. I don't quite like. It's a great insult. He's definitely right under this guy's skin. Like he's definitely insulted him in a way that is going to get that guy killed. But I don't understand why people cling to that line as if that's the cool line from this movie.
I mean, there's a lot of lines that I cling. I don't know. That whole scene is iconic. I can't think they're clinging to it with context. I think it's
that's definitely not context because the context is all off.
Yeah. I mean, I always cling to the line right after that where De Niro's like, no, you insult him a little bit, and only with a way better accent. I always loved that line right after that, a little better. But you're right, but that's, I mean, similar to Raging Bull, that's Joe Pesci's character. His insecurities there, Henry and Jimmy can insult him all day long and make jokes, but this guy, he's gonna bust his balls. He's gonna die. That's the kind of. It's an important scene, and it's really, it is kind of annoying that the context is lost with some of this movie when it comes to popular culture, because that does make you're onto something there, because there's definitely a lot of it's just more of a fun line to say, and when you think about it, it's not good.
Like you say that, am I supposed to get a gun and just come back and murder you? It's like
no, a knife. Just throw me in the back of your trunk and stab me a bunch. I
love that. Just that whole sequence where after the murder, where they go to Pesci's mom's house and they've got a corpse in the back of the car and he's kicking the seat. Jesus Christ. It is so surreal and so funny and so terrifying all at once. Is just so great. And Liotta is just so wonderful at capturing just how crazy that is without, like it's real for him and it's normal for him in a way, but he's so perfect at just being and allowing us to feel just how surreal this is.
Yeah. It is, and this is a movie, similar to The Devil All the Time, but this could have been, to me, that's what The Devil All the Time should have been shooting for, something like this, because this does, it's a long story, go over a long period of time, but you're never going to forget this movie, and that's what that's kind of maybe because of the timing of this being, coming out 30 years ago is why I can't just sit there and go, this is a great movie, The Devil All the Time. But this is what you need to shoot for. And then you sent an article to me where, it's a couple of things going on. One, The Godfather 3 comes out a little later on this year, and this mixed with a couple other mob movies, all within this 4-week period here. Last week's State of Grace, I think next week's King of New York, and then Miller's Crossing right after that. So bang, 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 week after week, you get these more in the mob movies from a different perspective. Instead of the romanticism of the top, the main guys, the Godfathers and whatnot. Here you got just kind of the street thugs, more or less. I mean, I'm horrible at terminology,
right?
But this is, this changed the game almost by itself. But these other 3 movies along with it, totally changed the game for mob movies. The Sopranos is more like this than it is The Godfather. And then you fast forward to we talk about Pulp Fiction changing the course of cinema. This was kind of the one that did it. If you really think about it based on that article, and when you watch Pulp Fiction, everybody was like, oh, they're just hitmen having regular everyday conversations. It was so unique and groundbreaking. Well, no, that's going on here too. Before that. So it really is that groundbreaking of a movie. It is that iconic of a movie. And The Simpsons, The Sopranos. I mean, there's so many references to this movie that, I mean, whether you've seen it or not, you've kind of seen it. It's one of those movies.
Yeah.
It's an all-time classic, and I think this is probably my favorite Scorsese movie, this or Taxi Driver, but right now recency bias is giving me this.
Think about just how different this movie is at the time. And if you shoot back to 1990, the way that he uses popular culture, the way he uses pop music,
yes,
that soundtrack is very unique. I mean, because there's a lot of movies wouldn't do that. A lot of movies, you can't do that. You can't do that really unless you're Martin Scorsese, because you get tied up in all these rights issues where you're like, yeah, we can do that for maybe the theatrical, but then when we go to home video, we're never going to be able to show this movie again.
Right.
Because we used all these classic pop songs. But he does it. He weaves them in so beautifully that everything creates such a feel. Every aspect, every choice of song creates such a feel, and it really is so perfect the way he uses them.
You're right. That's another thing Pulp Fiction got credit for, but this came before that, did it even better, or not necessarily better, but as good, better songs. Or I guess that's debatable, but regardless, you're right. It's so. I mean, he's got the end of Layla, like it's like the score almost. I don't know. It really is just kind of a change in cinema. Really started here almost. I don't know if that makes sense, but it seems like it really started. The '90s really kicked off with this movie.
Yeah.
Anything else on Goodfellas?
I think I don't know if I like this one better than Raging Bull, or if I like Raging Bull better in terms of being a movie directed by Martin Scorsese. It's hard to say. I can't really. I'm trying to separate them in my mind, and I think I like Raging Bull more.
For me, my preference is always going to be story first and art second, and I think everything about Raging Bull is more impressive. I just like the story. I think the story aspect of Goodfellas is tighter than Raging Bull. Raging Bull is more of a examination of Jake LaMotta. So it's more of a personal preference in terms of what I prioritize. But I mean, they're both fucking amazing. So who really gives a shit? I mean,
it's really nice.
Go ahead. Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's really nice to watch these two movies and think about good Scorsese again after my experience with Bringing Out the Dead.
Right. Or we done a nice run there of not bad, just kind of good movies, and that kind of stopped at good, and Bring Out the Dead was like all right. But yeah, and back to the comparison. I mean, it's like you have your favorite band, but the Beatles exist, so or Led Zeppelin exists. So yeah, there's Raging Bull, and I know there's aspects of it that are better than all these. Even Rocky, Rocky is my favorite movie, but yeah, I mean, yes, Raging Bull is a better work of art. I'm not interested in comparing the two. I'm more stories first for me, and then the art second. But that's why I hold it off on its own, kind of off to the side. It's hard for me to put it on a list because I don't know. It's a hard movie to compare, and so that's why I've always had a hard time with certain movies and how. I know I'm supposed to like it more, and I'm supposed to like Rush more too, but. Anything else before you move on?
No.
All right. Next week, we got possibly, I think The Swerve is a movie coming out, The Last Shift, The Secret Society of Second Born Royals. There's some few others that I scribbled down that I can't read. We don't have a classic at the moment. King of New York, another mob movie, Abel Ferrara, comes out along with Pacific Heights, Dark Angel, Texas Phil, and the Dolph Lundgren classic I Come in Peace. So that's next week. I want to remind you to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/criticspod, if you want to help support the podcast, along with our TeePublic page at IHateCritics.net. Also, rate and review the show on whatever platform you listen to us on. We'll try to read it on the air. I only get the Apple Podcast reviews, so if you send it elsewhere, let me know, and I'll go look for them there as well. Otherwise, let's move on to Flickchart while talking about the movie Alive. So, what do you want to...
This movie came out in 2018, actually. It was made in 2018. It's been on the shelf for a while and is only now kind of getting a release. I think Dredd is releasing this one, which Dredd is pretty great at putting out horror movies. Angus McFadden basically plays this mad scientist guy. He's also a serial killer, maybe. It's unclear, but a guy wakes up on a operating table, looks over, there's a girl next to him also on an operating table. They're being held down, and this doctor is taking care of them. But it's clearly not an operating hospital. There's it's dirty, it's grungy. There's no other patients around. There's no other people around. Just the three of them. He can't talk for whatever reason, and he's got all these various injuries. All he's stitched together as if he's been in a car wreck. And basically, the intrigue is kind of how they ended up here and how they're going to escape. You think they're maybe trapped by a serial killer who's kind of either gave them these injuries or found them and has been treating these injuries, keeping them alive. It's very odd, and that's really what works in the movie's behalf, is just how odd it really is, and it builds up towards this twist ending that you can't. It's hard to see it coming, I guess, which is a reasonable thing to say. I don't know if I like this movie or not, though. I think maybe it gets a lot of credit for being mysterious, but it's mysterious in a way that's kind of clumsy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was neat, if nothing else. You don't really like the characters aren't all that interesting, but that kind of plays into the twist. That's the thing. That's what makes him not interesting. So it all works for me, but it's also it's kind of a low budget movie. The acting's decent at best. To me, it's neat. You kind of show it to somebody else, they like it. Eventually, you show it to too many people, and the ending kind of gets spoiled, and it's not as effective. But really, without that ending, it would be a really forgettable horror movie.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, this would just be another serial killer movie without the twist ending, which is basically, we're talking spoilers, right?
Yeah.
They've been stitched together from other bodies. They're Frankensteins.
But
which really sounds silly when you say it out loud.
It sounds silly, but in fairness, they are working that the whole movie. Everything that's being done is being, it's not like they just threw the ending on to gotcha. I mean, they're definitely hinting at it the whole time. You probably wouldn't guess it.
Yeah. But
you would still, most likely, you just be like, oh. But if you didn't see it coming, it would be like, holy shit, that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even holy shit, but just, that's neat. Either way. And it's not a great movie by any means, but it accomplished what it was going for, and I think that's, cool. But it's not Martyrs, it's not like we've discovered this amazing horror movie. But it is good that the twist meant something, and it wasn't just out of left field. That's what
I don't get, though. There's this part at the end where they've gotten out of the hospital. They seemingly have escaped Angus McFadden, and they're trying. They're waving people down and trying to get a ride to get further away, and people just keep driving past them. People looking at them like they know who they are and they know what this is. Like they're aware of maybe what Angus McFadden's character has been doing this whole time. And that didn't make any sense to me. That seemed tacked on in a very odd sort of way. And I didn't really understand what that was. I did like the scene at the end in the police station where they kind of reveal it, but it takes forever for them to really get to the point of it. And then they sort of wrap the entire building like in plastic for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, wait. Like, do you think they're aliens, or do you think they're like radioactive? I don't understand. I didn't understand that aspect of it. I thought that was a really weird sort of thing to do.
I suppose, though, I mean, if you are bringing someone back from the dead based on, gluing body parts together, there's some sort of chemical involved. So I mean,
sure,
that didn't bother me too much. The driving by, he was built out of criminals. So maybe he was recognizable as, you got to bring that to it. It definitely took me out a little bit, all the cars driving by, especially how randomly they drove by. They only seemed to drive by when they accidentally were in the street, and they had to jump out of the way real quick. It wasn't like, and then it was like a dead road. So that scene definitely took me out of the movie a little bit. They could have been a lot tighter there and a lot smarter, or just don't do it. Have a bunch of cars drive by without them yelling at them or anything like that. Or, I mean, they were covered in blood, so I get why you would drive by, but the way they did it, you're right. It definitely was not a strong scene, but it's a movie. It's fine. It's creative. It's original. I'll take this over Hostel any day of the week, and I saw it. I got compared to Hostel a lot, and I was like, yeah, but the thing of what makes this so much better is at least the tone was the same the whole way through. You didn't have a comedy, the first 45 minutes of that movie.
You also I never got the sense that the director enjoyed watching these people be tortured, and they doesn't linger on these people being hurt, because actually, you don't really know what Angus McFadden's motivations are. Yes, he's definitely a serial killer, and he's definitely a creep and a villain, but he's also keeping these people alive for whatever reason. He's treating their wounds and trying to, keep them alive for whatever reason. So his motivation is a little bit is weird and creepy, and I guess kind of mean at times because he's a crazy mad scientist, but there's no lingering on him torturing them. And that's why the Hostel comparison doesn't work for me at all. Right. Because Eli Roth clearly thinks the torture is the point.
Oh, definitely. And to that audience, it is. Basically, I mean, I like comparing it to Hostel for the simple fact that it'll throw you off your game when you're watching it, because then you're not going to find out you're not going to figure it out, or you're not going to see the ending coming. But I don't know. It is what it is. I liked it. Yeah. Okay. It was fun. I mean, it was neat. Won't be on any top 10 lists or anything like that, but it's fun for what it was, and it'll be fun to show certain people, and then I'll probably be done with it.
All right, we'll put some timestamps in here so you can skip this part if you want to.
I'll try to remember that. It's not that memorable of a movie, so sorry for ruining it if you probably weren't going to watch it anyway. Quickly, you can do a couple unless you got to go.
Yeah.
Trading Places or Be Cool?
Trading Places.
Agreed. Zack and Mary Make a Porno, Kill Bill Volume 2.
Kill Bill Volume 2.
Correct. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hollywood Homicide.
Harry Potter.
Sorry to Bother You, Police Academy.
Sorry to Bother You.
That's our number one podcast since going to Libsyn. This is the one we talked about that.
Really? Wow.
By a lot, too. Then after that, it's like The Joker. Oddly enough, our Rob Zombie episode did really well than all the Marvel stuff. Driving Miss Daisy, The Wrestler.
The Wrestler. By a lot.
Steve Jobs, Crash. And it's the bad Crash, too. Not the David Cronenberger.
Steve Jobs.
Let's see. The Boondocks.
It's so cringy to read my Crash review right now. I've got it I'm putting together my book, and oh my God. What an asshole.
Yeah, but that's all of us. We were all assholes at one point.
That's true.
Boondock Saints, The Cider House Rules.
Oh, God, why? Oh, God, how fucking toxic can we get?
Yeah. Which one's more overrated?
Boondock Saints is more overrated, but I'll choose Cider House Rules just because Charlize Theron's in it, I guess.
Works for me. All Dogs Go to Heaven, Up.
Up.
Agreed. Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Twilight Saga, New Moon.
Captain America.
The Cider House Rules, Bridget Jones' Diary.
Where is this coming from? We have
no idea.
We've never talked about this fucking movie. Bridget Jones.
We watched that Social Dilemma last week. I literally I drove by a record store yesterday, and there was nobody in it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put my mask on and go in there. And I picked up a King Diamond record and put it back and bought something left, whatever. I've been seeing King Diamond ads like for merchandise and stuff on my social media. I didn't say King Diamond out loud. I didn't click on anything. I literally picked a record up. It's been weird. I just wanted to see what songs were on it because I'm not really that big of a fan. Anyway, Get Smart, Horrible Bosses.
Horrible Bosses.
I don't know why Cider House Rules reminded me of that story. But normally
Cider House Rules is the King Diamond of movies. No, I'm kidding. I don't know anything about King Diamond at all, actually.
That's cool. Godzilla 1954, Now You See Me 2013.
I like Now You See Me, so.
So did I. Superman 3, Training Day.
Training Day.
Agreed. Toy Story 3, In Bruges.
Ooh, wow. That is interesting. Toy Story 3?
Yeah. That is for me too. Shanghai Nights, Iron Man.
Iron Man. How the hell did they ever make a Shanghai Nights? How did they ever make a Shanghai sequel? That's fucking bizarre. What kind of universe do we live in?
I have no idea.
This is definitely the darkest timeline, and it started right there.
Yeah, well,
Shanghai Nights is how Trump got elected.
Well, these two movies being compared to each other coming up here are going to be a good way to go out on the podcast. I don't even want to say it out loud. 12 Years a Slave, Naked Gun, 2.5.